Okay, so first question I was going to ask was when exactly, what was the date, do you remember, of when you guys were liberated?
My camp was liberated on May the 4th, 1945. You know, the war ended a couple of days later.
Do you remember, you said that, I believe last time, with everybody started to sing their own national anthem. Was that?
Right, it was very unusual. I don't think many camps had that. It just happened where I was.
Okay.
Right.
Also, so after you were liberated, what was life like then? What happened after you were liberated? Like, where did you go? Or
What about the anthem? Do you have a question? Because we didn't sing an anthem.
okay,
The Hungarian Jewish guy,
Right.
we sang the Hatikva,
that's right. Yeah.
which is a song of hope, and later became the Israeli national anthem. So it was so well known in the community.
It's a Zionist song, right?
Well, it's not Zionist. Basically, it is talking about the hope of getting back eventually to Jerusalem, to have our own land.
How old were you when you were liberated, or when your camp was liberated? Do you remember?
It's about 16 and a half.
Okay. And so after you were after you were liberated, what occurred next? Like you were telling us this.
Well, I don't know whether you remember that because of the packages that we had, we were imagined that some crazy guy might still have a feeling of envy or whatever, and having some people having weapons disturbed us. So the first night, at the end of the Liberation Day, we wanted to be a safe place, and we went to sleep in one of those cattle wagons that were still within the compound. And then in the morning, we started to walk. And they were weak, but so they didn't cover large territories. But as it turned out, the first town was not too far away. So, and I don't know if I told you, but anyway, as we went out, we got into a larger road, and we saw the GI's troops walking. I mentioned that I saw somebody threw away a newspaper, and that's when I found out that Roosevelt was dead. And then I think I told you that the GI helped to get us the first amount of food as we walked. So the impression of the American GIs was always very exceptional. I started to feel the quality of the American mentality generally. And it was great to talk to people and have a very responsive reaction. So when we got to Haganah in late afternoon, again we were tired and hungry, and so I went over to a sergeant, a small the amount of people I saw was a small group of GIs. I don't know what kind of unit it was, but I saw a sergeant there. He seemed to be the highest rank, so I told him, my commander's English was pretty good, so I told him where we came from and where he suggested I could get some food. And he right away told us that whatever was, after they finished eating the leftovers, we didn't need much food because we still hardly could eat. But that guy, his name was Leo Itter, and we built a friendship, and to a point, and when he died several years after the war, several years, I don't remember the date, but it was a decade. My youngest son was a teenager, and he came with me for a funeral in Pennsylvania. But we settled in to the DP camp because it was a lot of empty buildings. Apparently the German Air Force officers emptied the place. And as it turned out, a displaced person camp was created right on that air field.
Were you all alone in that DP camp, or were you with somebody, or?
We were just the individuals who walked away together from a Berlin concentration camp.
What was the name of the camp that you were in that was liberated?
Berlin, W-O with 2 dots, horizontal. B, I think it's double B-L-I-N, Berlin. So it is next to Hagenau and Schwerin in Germany. It's northeast, close to the North Ocean.
What else? After the DP camp, what did you do? Did you stay there for a while, or how long did you stay?
It's a DP camp was important because it gave us a place to live and provided food. And later, first let me tell you what happened. The place where we settled emptied out. The GIs had to go back to America and to follow and Leo told me that they were heading for the Japanese War. So after they left, the English took over, and then still in 45, I guess around fall, the British offered to take us with them if we don't want to stay and wait for the Russian occupation. And there was enough bad news about Russian occupation that we went with them, and we went to Lüneburg, which was the English sector. And after we lived there for a while, we just wanted to do something, so we looked around and we found a job with at a building where the English Air Force officers were living, and they could use some people to help with some work, like working in a bar in the evening, and I guess giving English tea to the officers who drank it without getting out of bed. That lasted for a few months, but the largest DP camp was in Bergen, Belgium, which is not a concentration camp, but it was the same name, a large area which had a lot of buildings. I don't recall what was originally at that place. But at that point, when I got there, I realized that that there was an English organization which had offices, and they did interviews. There were many Jewish survivors, kids who didn't have any relatives as far as they knew of. And it turns out that no country would open their doors to the displaced people. And we didn't want to stay in Germany. That's the last place that we wanted to stay a length of time. So this organization needed people to translate. Well, I knew German in school, so it's close to Yiddish, so I could help the Polish kid survivors, and obviously I could help Hungarians because that was my native language, and I could translate it to English. So I got a job there, and it was a good place to work. I work from that point on. The rest of the time I spent in Germany, I worked for the Joint Distribution Committee, AGDC. And in 1945, all of a sudden my sisters happened to show up there, my younger sister. Apparently she had been somehow displaced from Hungary, and it was in German hands, and it ended up liberated. So from that point on, we were together.
Was this both your sisters or just the one?
Just one.
Okay.
Now to find out what happened to our family, we were not really willing to travel to the Russian-occupied land, but we figured that my parents, if my parents, we hope, survive, then they would go to the same apartment where we used to live. So we sent cards which were available, the information that we are here and we are alive and everything is okay as far as we were concerned. And eventually we got one back telling us that my parents survived, and that even my mother's mother, my grandmother, survived in a ghetto. After a while, the Joint Distribution Committee told me that they asked me where we decided to go. And after my first contact with Americans, with Leo Uta, for instance, from the day I arrived, every afternoon or evening, whenever they were not busy with the military work, a group of guys came to visit us. I said me because I was the only one who could converse with them. But it became a very relaxed time, and it's not only Jewish guys, because Leo Uta was a Jewish guy, but there were Texans who just somehow interested what's going on. And I remember sitting in our practically empty rooms, but somehow we got a table, and the Texans had their feet up on a table. So it was a relaxing chat that went on week after week. And that's when I decided that it's the United States where I want to go. I want to be surrounded by people who are very comfortable to live with. So to go to the United States, we had to go over to the American occupied section of Germany. So we went to Frankfurt am Main, and went to the consulate, and finally in 1947 we were able to get a visa, go to Butzbach near Bremen, and in November 47, we were on a boat to the United States.
Do you remember where you landed?
In New York.
New York?
I remember seeing the Statue of Liberty.
Was it Ellis Island?
We didn't go to Ellis Island. We somehow got dropped off in New York. I couldn't name the place.
What was that experience like?
Well, it was terrific. It took quite some time, and that we spent there. But then I got a problem. I apparently, physically, I wasn't in a good shape. My resistance to infections must have been very low. So I ended up having TB of the lungs. So I found myself in Denver, a Jewish hospital, where I spent several years. At that time, tuberculosis wasn't curable. So it was bed rest, and it was a lengthy procedure. And my sister got a location in Baltimore. And the social worker found a friendly family, a family who was their friend, I mean her friend, and ended up taken in by a very loving family. After I recovered, I came to Baltimore. And
How long after you got the TB in the lungs? How long until you came to Baltimore?
it was in let's see, I have some notes to myself. Anyway, we got on a boat November 17. We got to New York this November 29. I was in 1950. I was discharged from the hospital and came here, and the Jewish community supported me, and so I couldn't live where my sister location was. Beside which, by the time I got here, my sister was in college, Brandeis. So I tried to work out what I will be doing, and so I went to drafting school, and because I had an idea way back when I was a kid that I will be an architect. So I had no idea what it was like to be an architect in the United States. So I made an appointment with Hal Miller, architect, who took me to lunch, and he talked to me in broad terms what it was like, and by the end of the lunch I was hired as a draftsman in his office. I guess just looking back, they saw that I'm not a lazy guy, and I was interested in learning whatever I had to learn. So that's when I started working in architectural offices. Now, see, I wrote this down for other reasons some time back. So I was an architecture draftsman in Hal Miller's office until he died in 1954. And then one architectural engineer opened his one-man office. And when Hal Miller's office dissolved, I went to work with him until '59. Then for about 10 years, I worked for a large office where I really learned how to do a complete job. Some architectural offices are large, and some draftsmen are always doing staircases or they specialize them in different places. But this office I liked because a draftsman was responsible for the entire project.
What was the name of that office?
Bonnet and Brent,
Okay.
Cathedral Street.
And where was that?
701 Cathedral Street.
In Baltimore?
Yeah. I stayed in Baltimore.
Bonnet and Brand. Brand.
So then in 1968, I became aware that I have been working in architectural offices for 20 years. And then for about 5 years, I went to Goucher College at Hopkins for architecture-related courses, because there was no architectural school in Maryland at that time. So you couldn't get an architectural degree.
Right.
But that was to my advantage, because after I presented my college record and my experience record, I was able to apply for an examination to get to be a registered architect. And in 1969, I took the course, and in 1970, I took the two subject course, which I didn't pass the first time. So in 70, I passed it and became a registered architect.
When you were at Bonnet and Brand,
Right.
were you? That's when you were going to Hopkins at the same time.
I started then,
Okay.
but I continued when I worked for other firms.
Okay. Do you remember your favorite firm that you worked for?
Well, Bonnet and Brand was really the favorite firm, because some firms, like one firm I worked for, I found out they were anti-Semitic. They asked me, why didn't I apply to another firm which was in a basement? And I found out that in a basement there is a firm that one of the members was a Jewish guy.
Oh, wow. So after you got your registered architect license, what happened after that? Did you go?
Well, I worked for a couple of years at Edward White's office, and then I realized when that office kind of went to pieces, it had fewer and fewer contracts. So I decided I might as well try on my own. So from 1970 to 1986, I had my own office. It wasn't a great thriving office, because nobody knew me, and I didn't get jobs, but I did. There were many people who were speculators, and they wanted to build a good building with the least amount of expense. So they came to me when they saw that was a good place to get a set of architectural documents to do it. I didn't get many large. I got one large jobs from the Baltimore County school system. See, this is what I used to promote myself. See, so this is the last few years I had my office in this building. Mm-hmm. Because all I needed is a consultation place and a workplace. Mm-hmm. And I could have a large enough basement to accommodate that. So that was the last promotional booklet I put together. The Southeastern Vocational Technical Center in Dundalk, which was a major
Absolutely.
renovation and a major addition to a high school building to make it a vocational building.
Protect.
But you know, I had a number of jobs, obviously, in that many years. And then in 1986, there were very few architectural offices that were doing well, because there was apparently no money for this type of investment. So I decided that instead of spending my time to look for jobs and be frustrated, I applied for the state of Maryland, and the Department of Public Safety needed an architect. So that's where I spent the last 7 years of practice before retiring. And so I was supervising the prison architecture for the state.
When was it that you married your wife?
In 1954,
And that's when,
my girlfriend got pregnant, and I decided that it's a terrific thing to see a child. So I married her, and it was the happiest day of my life was when I saw my daughter,
what's her name?
Sue. Susan.
When was your daughter born?
Pardon me?
When was your daughter? When was Sue born? Her birthday?
1954,
1954.
same year.
So you got me. Okay.
Right. And then we had 2 sons.
When were they born?
58 and 61.
And their names were?
David and Robert.
After 19, what was it? When did you say you retired finally?
95.
1995. What did you do after then?
Well, I started loaf. I started volunteering for the aquarium. I started, to keep busy some way, which made sense.
Right. Have you always lived here with your family in this house?
No, this house belonged to my second wife,
Okay.
and my first marriage fell apart. My wife got some nervous ailment, and I wasn't able to live with her because I didn't get any input what goes on, how I can be helpful. And somehow I couldn't sleep at night. It was, for some reason she had to keep me awake. So both of us, both my first wife and I had this TB history, and we had to kind of make sure that we don't knock ourselves out in a way that would make us sick again. So that was the only way I saw out. With the kids, she was very good, and she loved the kids. So with my support, she had the kids. And
When did that happen? When did you finally leave?
I guess not 54. 1976. So we lived
For 22
together
years.
20 years.
And then when?
But the kids grew up right, and they learned how to concentrate. And,
Where were you living at that time?
in Baltimore,
Okay.
in an apartment.
When did you meet your second wife?
It was 10 years later,
10 years later. 1986.
right?
And did you marry her that year too? 1986?
I don't know when I first met her. That's when I married her.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But it wasn't very long after, because she's a real person I could live happily with.
What was her name?
Roberta.
Did you have any children with her or no?
No, but her children are now my children. So together we have 5 kids, and they like to be together.
And how many grandkids do you have now?
8.
8. Okay. And do they all have children? All of your children have children, or just only some of your children?
One daughter that has no children, is not married.
Okay. And how old are they now? All of your children?
Well, they're in the 50s.
Okay.
And they all have jobs.
Did any of them follow after you and become an architect?
No. My daughter is working as a echocardiogram specialist, and my older son was director at Fannie Mae, and the younger son is a vice president at General Dynamics.
Through those years, did you ever reunite with your sisters, or?
Well, my sisters, we are always in touch. It turned out that my older sister came to the United States, and later my parents came to the United States. It wasn't an easy thing to get from Hungary to here, but eventually they made it.
Did they all live in the Baltimore area, or did they?
No, my younger sister, with her family lives in California, and the older sister in Chicago. And my parents are not alive.
Mhm.
My mother, who had a very tough life, lived to be 105 years and 10 days old.
Wow.
It's amazing how she was able to live that long.
That's amazing. You never hear of that anymore. Living over 100 years old.
Well, if you look for it, you see, you hear about many people. 'Cause
Well, is there anything else that you really want to tell us about? Or any stories? Or
well, you can see how lucky I got. Luck was with me. You know, I don't talk about the fact that you know, that how long I had pneumothorax for my TB, and I'm living now for more than 30 years with diabetes and its complications, but it doesn't stop me completely, so life goes on.
Have you ever gone back to Hungary?
My wife and I went back because the Jewish gymnasium where I went, my class wanted reunions to see the few survivors. And there were two couples, we and another old classmate went to Budapest and looked around. And we were happy to leave because they were still anti-Semitic. Even today, the first newspaper I got in my hand.
Is there a so what's going to work with these interviews is we're going to put them on CDs,
Right.
and then eventually, well, besides us telling your story to
Right.
an audience, we're also going to put them in an archive. So eventually people can use these for education, for writing papers
Right,
or whatnot.
right.
Is there any sort of message that you want to send to a future student who listens to who looks at your interviews? Is there any sort of message that you want people to get from the story that you've been so wonderful sharing
Well,
with us?
they have to realize that people who are full of hate can do atrocious things. And many people who were filled up with hate, like in Germany, they were exposed to a lot of propaganda and a lot of hate is generated by people who want to use that for their own purposes. So the American people are aware that there are many countries in the world, in Asia, which are teaching them to hate U.S. American people and to kill them. And you can't take this lightly. Whenever there is hate, you have to make sure that you just don't disregard it, but you act on it in any positive way that you are able to act. Get together with like-minded people and resist it. That very strong way.
What was the name of your first wife?
Helen.
Helen?
And there's something I've always wanted to ask you since the first day. I noticed that you wear your ring on your right hand, on that finger.
Because I lose rings. They wash off. And here there's enough of a knuckle that it won't come off.
I always wondered, I didn't know if there was a reason for it, but that's a good reason.
I get into the shower and somehow they disappear.
Do you guys have any other questions?
I just want to make sure, so you said that you were 15 or 16 when you were liberated?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to. Other than that,
Well, thank you
You
again.
had enough.
Yeah, never.
no, yeah.
Thank you very much, though,
Yeah, thank you.
for telling us everything. We also, yeah, do you have a camera?
I have my phone. Is there someone that?
Well, we could also do it at the